Mayor, City Council, we're live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 16th, 2022 meeting of the Pasadena City Council. We'll start the meeting with the calling of the roll.
Councilmember Hampton,
Blessed to be here.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Here.
Councilmember Madison is absent. Councilmember Masuda? Here. Councilmember Rivas?
Here.
Councilmember Williams?
Here.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
Here.
Mayor Gordo?
Here.
There's a quorum in the council present.
And I'll ask Ms. Williams to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have one ceremonial matter, and I'll ask our Public Works Director, Mr. Olmos, to join me at the podium. So this is Public Works Week, National Public Works Week, and public works infrastructure, facilities, and services are vital and important in sustainable communities and the health, safety, and well-being of the people of Pasadena. The planning, development, and operations of public works such as storm drains, power, streets, bridges, street lighting, signals, public buildings, public fleets, street trees, solid waste collection, and recycling is essential in meeting the needs of our residents. Such facilities and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, engineers, maintenance staff, and administrators. And that is why I'm pleased to proclaim the week of May 15th through the 21st of 2022 in Pasadena as National Public Works Week. I would also say that the importance of public works has been recognized by residents of Pasadena over decades with the investment made in our public works and facilities. And so I would commend residents of Pasadena for that investment. And thank you, Mr. Olmos, and your staff. I know, yeah. Okay, with that, I would ask that we move on to the agenda and start with the consent calendar. So,
Mayor, the city clerk's office received correspondence on items 7 and 9. For item 7, one letter in support of the staff recommendation and was received, and which commended the fire chief for moving quickly and effectively to implement a new planning process. That was for item 7. And for item 9, one letter in support of the staff recommendation was received by the city clerk's office with comments expressing PMA does not support a piecemeal approach to providing salary increases to a handful of positions. Those 2 letters were received by the city clerk's office, distributed to the city council, have been posted online, and are part of the record for those 2 items.
thank you. And is there a motion
Move approval, Mayor. Second.
Second.
moved by Mr. Kennedy and Vice Mayor Wilson, Councilmember Williams, third? Roll call?
To approve all the consent items, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison is absent, Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Next, we have item 12, and this is a fairly routine matter involving our recommended schedule of taxes, fees, and charges. And we will welcome Mr. Hawksworth into the chambers. Matt, welcome.
I'll be in a few other meetings this week and I'll try it out. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As the mayor stated, this is our annual update of the schedule of taxes, fees, and charges. According to the government code, we have to bring this item forward as a public meeting. And then following this public meeting, next Monday will be the public hearing on this item. So the council will see this twice. We do have a brief presentation. Bianca Benaga in our budget division can provide that. However, just as a caveat, the one increase this year is the increase that's each year, and that's for the business license tax. The other taxes on the schedule, utility users tax, transient occupancy tax, those don't change each year. So they are flat, but we do list them each year in the schedule.
So there's one that's actually changing.
It's the one category, the business license tax.
Yeah.
There's a variety of different. The council
I
will
see.
also see next week as a separate item will be the general fee schedule. And the general fee schedule is where building fees, planning fees, recreation fees, and all the user type fees the council will review and approve. And that's where you'll see new fees, amended fees, and it's a much longer list.
Got it. What's the will of the council? Do we go forward with the presentation? Or just highlight the one change? No? Highlight the change? Okay. So why don't we go ahead and highlight the change? Ms. Benaga? Not sure, or Mr. Hawksworth, one of you will do it.
I'll jump in, and Bianca could certainly correct me where I get something wrong. As I mentioned earlier, this is an annual thing. We adjust it by the consumer price index for the Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Anaheim County area. For this year, the figure was just shy of 7.4%. This is just a disclaimer of the public notices that are required. the fees changes are effective July 1 of 2022, except for the grandstand permit, the Rose Bowl admissions tax, and the grandstand seat surcharge, because these are all part of the New Year's Day activity. The municipal code provides that these are done on a different timeline. And that's the highlight of it.
I'd like to move approval, Mayor.
Okay. It's been
Second.
moved and seconded. And roll call.
To approve the staff recommendation, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison is absent, Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
Next, we'll move into the second reading of two ordinances, items 13 and 14. Mr. Clerk?
I just was checking and there are no,
Oh, no public comment?
I'm checking. There are no public comments on items 13 and 14. We did receive one letter that was actually related to item 13 and 14. It's in the same letter. And part of the letter, it advocated for more affordable housing in the city and for Pasadena not to allow historical or landmark districts to be created as a way to avoid the state's direction, but to approve only legitimate applications for historic or landmark status. And 14, the letter advocated for the city council to remove red tape and hasten the process of splitting urban lots and adding additional dwellings in single family zones to increase affordable housing stock. That letter was associated with both 13 and 14 and is part of the public record for those items and has been distributed to the council and posted online. As far as the reading, for item 13, this was an ordinance introduced by Councilmember Hampton. This is an ordinance of the City of Pasadena amending various provisions of Title 17 and Paren zoning code of the Pasadena Municipal Code related to historic preservation. To adopt the ordinance, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison is absent, Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on to 14. Before I lose my sense of humor, I heard that part. This was also introduced by Councilmember Hampton. This is an ordinance of the City of Pasadena pertaining to construction of 2-unit developments and urban lot splits and terminating urgency ordinance number 7385. To adopt and as I said, it was introduced by Councilmember Hampton. To adopt the ordinance, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison is absent, Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you, colleagues and staff. Great work. Next, we move on to item 15. This is a matter for information related to the homeless count.
And as staff comes in, I would note that there are 3 speaker cards submitted for this item. And the city clerk's office received correspondence on this item. One letter stating that the homeless count report raises grave concerns in the lack of progress made to reduce the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in the city and advocated for additional funding and more support for the housing department and specifically for an effective interim housing program. The second letter commended the Pasadena Port Team for their efforts with helping the homeless and provided comments related to health and safety concerns occurring at transit and metro stations by mentally ill homeless individuals. That correspondence was posted online, distributed to the council, and is part of the record for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and welcome, Mr. Wong.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. We're here today to give our annual update on the homeless count and an overall report. And uh, the positive news is that overall, the homeless count number is essentially level. On the yet to be on the negative side, we still have over 500 individuals or neighbors here who are without permanent housing. But the fact that the homeless number has not been rising rapidly over the last several years really is a testament to those with whom we stand to address the issue of homelessness. Our fellow departments, public health, libraries, parks, recreation, community services, police, fire, and others, our service providers, our faith-based organizations, our homeless and housing supporters, city manager, and the city council. And so I am particularly appreciative of the very supportive environment that we've all worked really hard to build here in Pasadena to address this issue. I was speaking to a colleague from another city recently and told them, oh yeah, our last two permanent supportive housing projects were approved unanimously with no community opposition. They couldn't believe that that was possible. Finally, I'm extremely grateful to our dedicated staff, Jenny O'Reilly Jones and her team. We have a lot of work to do. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jenny to give the report.
Thanks, Bill. All right. Well, good evening or good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. It's my pleasure to present to you the results of our 2022 homeless count. The 2022 Pasadena homeless count was conducted on February 22nd, beginning at sunset and ending the next day at sunrise. The count provides us with a snapshot in time, giving us an estimate of the size and demographics of the population experiencing homelessness on any given night. Fluctuations and compositional changes throughout the year do, however, occur, and the count does not tell us how many people experience homelessness over a period of time, such as an annual total. As a result, the count is only one of many data sources we use to assess and understand the needs of those without a safe and stable home. Volunteers once again use their phones and tablets to collect real-time survey information, which improves data accuracy over paper and pencil methods. On the night of the count, there were 512 people experiencing homelessness in Pasadena, demonstrating a continued leveling off in the size of our homeless population. Here you can see the numbers of people experiencing sheltered homelessness in the dark blue over the past 12 years. Fluctuations in the sheltered population are often the result of programmatic changes as the inventory of shelter or transitional housing beds increases or decreases. The lighter blue represents the unsheltered population. The orange trend line represents a 3-year rolling average of our total homeless population. Calculating and analyzing a rolling average helps us to gauge the overall direction of our data, while smoothing out short-term and year-to-year fluctuations or anomalous changes. Rolling averages more accurately highlight long-term trends and are preferable to year-to-year comparisons. The pandemic prevented us from conducting a full homeless count in 2021, which is reflected in the chart. You can see that after a long downward trend since homelessness peaked in 2011, the size of our homeless population has remained relatively flat over the past several years. Nevertheless, homelessness remains a pressing regional and statewide crisis, and even local numbers are unacceptably high. 1 in 4 people experiencing homelessness in the United States resides in California, and of those homeless Californians, 41% reside in Los Angeles County. Our homeless count results must be considered in the context of the larger humanitarian crisis we are amidst. The count includes a tabulation and survey of people experiencing homelessness in both unsheltered and sheltered locations. This year, 55% of our homeless population was found to be experiencing unsheltered homelessness. This number includes those who were living on the streets, in cars, in encampments, under freeways, and other locations not meant for human habitation. 45% of our homeless population was counted in sheltered locations. This figure includes those who were living in emergency shelter, including those using motel vouchers and transitional housing. The point in time count utilizes the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's definition of literal homelessness. As such, individuals and families who are doubled up or couch surfing are not included in the count. 2 out of 3 people who were found to be experiencing homelessness on the night of the count indicated that they were last housed in Pasadena and had resided here for an average of 18 years before losing their home. Half of our homeless population was found to be experiencing chronic homelessness, meaning they had a disability and had experienced at least 12 months of homelessness in the past 3 years. Among the chronically homeless population, 71% had been Pasadena residents for an average of 21 years before losing their home. This year's survey included questions related to the pandemic. 16% of the unsheltered homeless population self-reported that they had been diagnosed with COVID at some time during the pandemic. 54% reported being fully vaccinated, and of those who were not vaccinated, 12% indicated that they did want to receive the vaccine. The Housing Department has already brought these findings to the Public Health Department, and additional steps are underway to bring the vaccine to more of our unhoused neighbors. This year, we found that a greater share of our homeless population reported fleeing domestic violence, or DV. In 2020, 13% reported they were fleeing DV. This year, we found that 25% were fleeing. This figure does, however, include a new transitional housing site for women fleeing domestic violence, which inflates the figure slightly. Controlling for the impact of this new DV site, we still find that 19% of our unhoused neighbors are fleeing domestic violence. 95% of all households experiencing homelessness were made up of single adults, while 5% were families with minor children. When compared to the city of Pasadena's population as a whole, people experiencing homelessness are far more likely to be male, as is the case across the nation. Once again, Black people experiencing homelessness were significantly overrepresented in our overall homeless population, a disparity that we also see across the county and nationwide. This unjust inequality is a reflection of the widespread systemic racism which plagues our nation. And while the homeless services system largely inherits this inequality, we bear the responsibility of ensuring that our continuum of services is proactively designed to promote equity. This year, we observed the alarming growth of homelessness among those who identify as Hispanic or Latino. We found that 44% of our homeless population was Hispanic or Latino compared to 37% of our city's general population. You can see here the incremental growth of this segment of our homeless population over the past 6 years, with the most marked increase occurring in the last 2 years. This disparity can also be seen when examining certain subpopulations such as seniors, chronically homeless, and transitional age youth. However, the greatest disparity is among families with minor children, where Hispanic and Latino families make up 80% of those experiencing homelessness. Here you can see that adults between the ages of 40 and 61 are most likely to be experiencing homelessness, followed by young adults and then seniors. Give us a second. Among seniors aged 62 and older, 67% did not experience homelessness until after they had turned 40. 72% of seniors pointed to financial reasons as a factor in their housing loss, and 28% cited eviction or foreclosure as a factor in their housing loss, with 80% of those occurring in Pasadena. Another priority population we track is transitional aged youth between the ages of 18 and 24. Of this subpopulation, half have a history with the foster care system, compared to only 12% of our overall homeless population. 65% of transitional age youth were sheltered on the night of the homeless count, and 1 in 4 have children of their own. While local, regional, and state investments in combating homelessness are at an all-time high, our homeless response system continues to bear the challenges and failures of other existing systems. We know that a number of upstream challenges are what drive people into homelessness, including rising rents amidst low and stagnant wages, an insufficient housing supply, systemic racism, an inadequate social safety net, and a lack of support for those exiting institutions. In order to effect lasting change, these drivers into homelessness must be addressed to stem the inflow. Pasadena's approach to combating homelessness includes a primary focus on connecting people to permanent housing with a housing first approach. We know that a home is the only thing that will end a person's experience of homelessness. We also place a focus on preventing homelessness and have increased our investments in homelessness prevention programming, including legal services and in financial supports throughout the pandemic. Providing low barrier emergency shelter, whether at congregate sites or through the provision of motel vouchers, offers safety and stability so that people may move forward toward permanent housing. During the pandemic, our congregate shelters were forced to reduce their capacity by upwards of 75% to meet the CDC's bed spacing guidelines, and they continue today to operate in this decompressed state. Additionally, the bad weather shelter has not been in operation for the past 2 years for COVID-related reasons. Despite these significant constraints on our shelter system, we have been able to sustain our pre-pandemic emergency shelter bed inventory through the expansion of motel voucher programming, including a coordinated set of weather-activated motel programs during the winter months. And finally, Pasadena boasts a robust network of specialized street outreach teams, which meet people where they are at to connect them to the services they need. Our commitment to permanent housing is evident in this overview of existing, new, and upcoming permanent housing programming. It is critical to note the importance of developing a balanced homeless response system. Our ability to quickly move people through the shelter system and maximize the use of our shelter resources rests on the availability of permanent housing. Currently, our system is imbalanced, and long shelter stays, some longer than a year, are not uncommon. It is inarguable that we need more shelter resources in Pasadena. However, we must continue to strive for a balanced system in order to maximize the efficiency and utilization of our limited resources. What will an end to homelessness in Pasadena look like? Our goal is to make the experience of homelessness rare, and when it does occur, that it be brief and non-recurring. I'm pleased to report that last year, 277 people experiencing homelessness in Pasadena were permanently housed. This number includes those who were housed through permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing programs, as well as other types of permanent housing. And I would like to thank all of our dedicated volunteers who contributed to the success of the 2022 homeless count. I especially want to echo Bill's earlier comments and express my gratitude to those within the city who made the count possible, including the HOPE team, the PORT team, our libraries, our Department of IT's GIS division, and our partners in the Public Health Department. These collaborations, along with the participation of over 160 community members, professional outreach workers, partner agencies, and faith-based organizations, are fundamental to the collecting of meaningful data in an effort to further our understanding of homelessness in the city and to inform the implementation of effective solutions. I invite you all to review the full report on our new mobile-friendly website, pasadenahomelesscount.org. It's really fun to kind of scroll through and click through. It's a really beautiful website. And to those in the community who are tuned in on KPAS, please do visit the website, and you'll also have an opportunity on the website to sign up to participate in the strategic planning that's currently underway to develop our city's updated homelessness plan. Thank you.
Thank you for the report, very thorough and informative. Let me start with questions from colleagues. Vice Mayor Wilson. Your hand is up.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jenny and Bill. As my colleagues are aware, I've participated in the homeless count for the last, 6 or 7 years, excluding the year we didn't have a count. Obviously, It's kind of bittersweet news. We're all, I think, holding our breath to see, where things shook out. And I guess given where my expectations were, this is maybe a modicum of good news. Jenny, do we know what, obviously homelessness is kind of a regional issue. Do we have any context for what's happening across LA City and County and what their homeless population has done?
So they haven't released their results yet. We expect to hear from LASA, who will report on the city and the county of LA in late June or early July. There are some continuums of care around Southern California and throughout California that have reported, and it's been a little bit of a mixed bag, some increases, some decreases, but we don't know yet for the county.
I think there was great fear with the pandemic that we would see a big spike, but certainly we haven't seen it here. And perhaps a combination of, eviction moratorium and funding from various agencies. So anyway, I'm super interested because it's really hard to tell how we're doing in isolation. So I would ask as soon as that's available, we get some sort of update. I know you cited a lot of survey data, and I know when we were out in the field a few months ago, engaging our unhoused population, not all of them were eager to provide the full survey responses or weren't in a situation where they could respond. How many surveys were completed?
I can get you the
Interviews?
exact number in a moment, but we did have a 51% response rate on the surveys from our unsheltered population. And then we designed the survey to align with the intake questions and for our sheltered programming. So we're able to pull the data from that segment of the population as well.
Okay, so it's a pretty good representation. I know we have some goal that we were trying to hit in terms of survey percentage. I can't remember what it was, but did we hit it?
Yes, we do. We do keep a close eye on our response rate because we want to ensure that our data remains reliable. And 51% is a strong response rate.
And then on slide 19, you talked about the drivers for homelessness, and obviously some of those are financial and loss of housing and being evicted. I was just reflecting on the important conversation that the mayor set up a few meetings ago with Dr. Sharon from the county around mental health. And I really feel we don't do ourselves any service by not acknowledging that our mental health system is woefully broken, and a lot of our mental hospitals are now often our streets of our city. And I think we all need to more fully comprehend that. I look at that conversation, and I think there was a number around 20% were suffering from fairly significant mental health issues. And though that is not in my majority of them, I think that part of the population is most at risk in terms of what could happen to them on the street. I also suspect they're a population that is most involved in calls for service and things like that. So I would ask that you all build mental health more actively into your strategy. Housing is important, but honestly, having interacted either directly or encountered that part of a homeless population, it's just hard to imagine how they're ready to be in housing. So I think mental health is an incredibly important part of the formula. And once again, I think Dr. Sharon's discussion around that was super important as well. So anyway, I say bittersweet. I think I was expecting something a little worse. So we're kind of maybe at the margin, slightly improved, but certainly a long way to go. So thank you, Mayor. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wilson. Councilmember Masuda, followed by Mr. Kennedy.
Mayor, Councilmember Kennedy was before me.
That's okay. I'm looking at the screen.
Go ahead, Councilmember Masuda, please.
Sorry about that.
John, did you want me to go first? Okay, thank you very much. Mayor, I just wanted to report that I attended a curbside chat on Friday, and I attended with my field rep at Sierra Madre Villa neighborhood at former Mayor Bill Paparian and his wife Sona's home. It was well attended, and it included the Hope team, of course, the police and the port team. But the number one question and concern was homelessness, and there was a lot of questions and answers, and the police and the port team did an outstanding job. And of course, Bill, the housing department was mentioned as well as doing an outstanding job, and that's the reason why our numbers went from 1,200 in 2011 to what it is today when I see 512. So congratulations, that's really great. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Masuda. Mr. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer O'Reilly Jones, fine piece of work that you have prepared for the consideration of the mayor and the council. It's clear to me that you have a passion for this work. I'm glad you are in the position that you're in. Further evidence of that view that I have will be demonstrated by hopefully your sharing what solutions are out there to change the trend line related to African Americans being disproportionately represented in our homeless population and the complexities of finding a solution. So I'd like to know if you would take a minute or two just to tell us your views on, your professional views on that alarming number that you shared.
Absolutely, and thank you for those kind words. Um, so we spend quite a lot of time and effort around addressing racial disparities in our homeless population, and we're not alone. It's really at the forefront of every conversation around homelessness these days. I would say that the first thing that we do is evaluate ourselves on a regular and kind of near constant basis, and um, by that I mean we run analyses of the programming that is provided throughout the city, both funded by the city and not, to ensure that we are providing services in an equitable manner and that services are being accessed um, in an equitable way, and that the outcomes also are equitable. And so that is a constant ongoing process, uh, as I said, to ensure that our system, our homeless response system, isn't making the disparities worse. And we do pretty well in Pasadena. There are in the service outcome service outcomes, there are some differences, but they tend to be in programs that rely on kind of the general housing market, for instance, places where we know there's already a lot of existing racism. We also work to ensure that there are people of color, and by we I mean not only the housing department staff, but our funded service providers. But as a system, we're really striving to ensure that there are people of color at every level of the organizations, including decision-making levels. And so our agencies are recruiting more people with lived experience, who are often people of color. Our continuum of care does the same with its board, which creates policy and program and funding decisions. And there are also leadership training programming at some of our funded agencies to help to lift people of color up through the ranks of those organizations. So those are some of the strategies that are employed. We do we are working to uh, what is the word I'm going to use? We are working to roll out as many of the recommendations of LASA's groundbreaking report on Black people experiencing homelessness as we can. Some of those are accessible to us as a city continuum of care, and others are more accessible to our service providers. Um, so I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into the ways that we're looking at this. Um, but as I said, it's racial disparity is really at the forefront of everything that we do. And this year, with the results that we saw around increases in our Hispanic and Latino population, we'll be really adding that layer onto all of those conversations. That's something that we're quite concerned about too. Um, that's getting worse in our community.
On the LASA report, will that be provided electronically and hard copy to the council?
Sure, absolutely.
And if there were two things that this council could do to have an immediate impact on the 25+% number of African Americans experiencing homelessness or houselessness in Pasadena, what would it be? What can the council do? What affirmative steps? What budget priority difference can this council do to have an impact? Have you given some consideration to that? And if so, would you please share?
Councilmember, this is Bill Wong. Not an easy solution. I would point to the Heritage Square North property, which was not a property designed to house folks experiencing homelessness, but although some were housed there, but it's very low income senior housing. And there was a lot of effort made in the outreach and the marketing of those particular units. And as a result, those who ended up occupying the property, they all came from Pasadena, and there was a real mix of persons, their ethnic backgrounds, who occupied that building. I believe that building was 25% African American on the initial lease up. So it was very diverse in making just extra effort, working with the developer to make extra effort in the outreach for those particular units. So it's not a budgetary thing, but just being careful and thorough on outreach, so that folks who are eligible for the housing aren't overlooked and don't and miss the opportunity to take advantage of things like the permanent housing there.
And is it your commitment to the council that will continue on Heritage Senior Apartments South, as well as other development opportunities that would help us deal with the extremely low income clients, residents, etc.?
Absolutely. On the Heritage Square South, which will be permanent supportive housing for homeless seniors, and for the Salvation Army project that's currently under construction, which will also be permanent supportive housing for adults, including some veterans. Yes, we will work with the homeless service providers on the outreach, utilizing a coordinated entry system to make sure those who need the housing get the housing.
So, to allow my other colleagues who would like to share, I would simply say that what you have shared tonight, Jennifer, is not necessarily a secret, but it is still nevertheless alarming. And I appreciate the leadership of Bill Wong and his team. You are a critical member of the team to address the issue, not just talk about the issue, and be willing to, within the law, deal with the issue. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight. And it was, in fact, extremely sobering for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Next, we will move on to Ms. Rivas.
Thank you, Mayor. And I also want to start, like Councilmember Kennedy, just commending the department on their presentation and their reports and just their work on this issue in general. Of course, I just find your reports incredibly well written and easy to digest, a lot of facts and figures, your presentations as well, but without losing sight of the humanity of our neighbors that we're talking about. So I really appreciate that. There was a line in the report, something to the effect about the proportion between emergency versus interim and permanent supportive housing and how we're always trying to strike a balance between those. And of course, we also heard about an increase in homelessness amongst Latino families, which is really alarming. I was wondering if you had a sense of what those families need, if we know if they need more emergency or permanent or both. I'm sure it's probably both. Or do you have a sense that they need more one than the other?
I would say it's an all of the above, and I would add to your list homelessness prevention. Bill mentioned how with permanent housing opportunities we can target outreach to try to reach equitable housing placements, and we're doing the same work around homelessness prevention right now, particularly with the sunsetting of the eviction moratorium coming up. Um, our data reflects what a lot of data sources are showing, that the Latino and Hispanic community has been impacted particularly hard by the pandemic. And so we're working now to roll out additional prevention resources and to ensure that those resources are accessible and really advertised to that community so that we can prevent further increases among that population.
Jenny, if I can add one more point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all the families who were unhoused families, most of the unhoused families were already sheltered. So there were very few which were not unsheltered. So
That's correct. All but 2 families on the night of the homeless count were sheltered, but we did find 2 who were unsheltered that evening.
Got it. Thank you for that. That's encouraging that they're mostly sheltered. Thank you for that.
Yeah, well,
Thank you, Mayor.
that's promising, and I'll be interested to hear follow up on the remaining 2 families. I imagine we continue to work with them, and is it possible that they found services elsewhere? Or I just don't know what.
They've likely been connected with services or shelter. Yeah.
Okay.
Unsheltered families in our community are so rare. And just overall, families have a much higher rate of sheltering than individuals.
Yeah, that's why I'm
Yeah.
surprised. Well, one, I want to say, thank you for taking swift action with with all of these individuals and families. But I'd be interested to know what my understanding is similar to yours, that families are able to find housing quicker than the individuals, or at least find services and accept the services very quickly. And so I'd be interested to hear the follow up with these 2 families and what, if anything, we learned from that experience.
okay, we can try to track that down.
And maybe as part of the city manager's weekly letter, we just have an update on that.
We can do that, and we can also put in the link to LASA's report on Black homelessness.
Yeah. Mr. Hampton?
I had some technical difficulties. Did we already do public comment?
No, not yet.
Oh, I could wait for my comments after
Okay.
public comment.
I
Thanks, Mayor.
I do have some. There are 4 cards, but before we move to that, I do have some questions. So, and comments. The disability slide, or the slide addressing people with disability, didn't break out Can you go back to, I think it was slide 7 or 8? 8, okay. Well, you don't have to pull it up. Just, so did we gauge, um, or did we measure what type of disability? Is it a combination, or did one disability or another surface, either mental health, substance abuse, or other physical disabilities? And are we, I know on the mental health and substance abuse issues, we've addressed those, but in terms of physical disability, um, beyond mental health or substance abuse, are we able to adjust or ask providers to adjust some of the housing to help individuals with physical disabilities? Did one rise to the top?
So we collect data on different types of disabilities, uh, mental health, substance use disorder, physical disability, chronic health condition, and HIV or AIDS. Beyond that, for the homeless count, we don't collect any additional details. Also, I forgot to mention traumatic brain injury and developmental disability. I'm getting the breakdown quickly to show you. We didn't include the breakdown of disabilities in this year's report because it tends to be pretty stable year after year. We're trying to make the report a little bit, or the presentation a little bit more succinct. And so let's see if my colleague has sent it to me, but it's about 25% physical disabilities, 35% mental health, 24% substance use, and 28% chronic health. And um, some smaller percentages for the other ones. Of course, they don't add up to 100 because people have multiple disabilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the service providers and particularly the, they really work under a motto of whatever it takes for as long as it takes. So if
Yeah.
somebody has a chronic health issue, they will continue to work. If someone has substance use disorder, they will continue to work with them. They try to provide a wide range of services or connect them to a wide range of programs to address those issues,
Yeah.
which are the issues that really lead to homelessness. Homelessness actually is the symptom of those
Right.
issues.
Great. If you can include that in your update,
Okay, we can get those stats.
just the stats, I'd be interested to see if we see any patterns. I mean, the obvious ones are mental health and substance abuse, but other types of physical disabilities, other type of physical disabilities, I'd be interested to see as well.
Okay.
And with regard to transitional age youth, I'm not surprised by the data. It supports what we have discussed before, and particularly because Pasadena and Altoona, within our school district boundaries, we have the highest number of group homes, both large group homes and small operators anywhere in the county, and likely, I would suggest, maybe even in the state, given the size of our county. And so again, would ask that we pay particular attention to transitional age youth who have been through a very difficult time.
Here, you're chopping out a little bit.
Who have been the transitional aged youth. I mean, all of these uh, individuals, whatever category they may find themselves, um, particularly disabled, but those suffering from in mental health or substance abuse, but also I think one of the populations that we haven't provided enough emphasis on, not we as a city, but generally in society, uh, is the transitional age youth. And given the numbers in our community, the numbers of group homes and individuals who come from all over the county, I think this is a population that needs extra care and attention. And we have the providers. And, Vice Mayor Wilson addressed or touched on our discussion with Dr. Sharon. And I can tell you that we've had follow-up conversations, the city manager and I, with the hospital, with Dr. Morgan and her staff. And we are going to take more steps in the direction of addressing the mental health issue together with the county. So we can all expect more information related to that issue going forward. And well, I'll leave it at that and look to see if there are any other questions or comments. And Bill, you should probably be a part of those discussions as well, or Jennifer.
We'll be glad to
As
participate.
we participate in those discussions with the county. This week, I've got a follow-up with Supervisor Barger to make sure she's fully briefed on the direction that we'd like to head in, or at least that I'd like to see us headed. Mr. Clerk, there were 4 cards.
Yes, Michael Williams, Brittany Pollock, Sonia Burnt, and Jill Shook all submitted speaker cards for this item. So we will bring in Michael Williams first. The timer set for 2 minutes. 2 minutes, and I will ring a bell to give a 30-second warning of your 30 seconds remaining.
Mr. Williams, welcome.
There he is.
Oh, he was just there. There he is.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I don't know if this was said before, but I think there's some gaps in the data collection around houselessness and the decrease of houselessness. I think there needs to be more analytics on why why the curve is going down or why it's going up. Just counting how many houseless people are in Pasadena doesn't mean that those folks are being housed or have been housed. We know that people who are houseless have a range of health issues that could cause them to be to die early. We know that people are transient, that they leave. We know that Pasadena has some very restrictive and harsh laws on panhandling, which could also be a reason why they are leaving and not staying in Pasadena. And we know also that the police are target people who are houseless for arrest, and so that's another reason why they can be leaving. So there needs to be some data on that specifically, on why houselessness has occurred, not just counting how many houseless people are in Pasadena currently. The other thing is when we look at our budget, our housing budget and our mental health budget, 2 things that we know houseless people struggle with. Both those things combined don't even equal our police budget. And that's something that shouldn't be. If you look at places that have lower crime, if you look at how even America has reduced its crime, it's not through more policing, and it's not through harsher laws or penalties. It's through public services. It's through resourcing public service, public education, better health care, better ability for housing. Those are the things that have reduced crime over the years, not policing, not harsher restrictions on houselessness.
Mr. Williams,
Those are the things that we should be analyzing and looking at.
Mr. Williams, your time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I would like to correct the record, and I understand the confusion because the issue of panhandling and loitering has been hotly debated in the past, and one question, the legality of enforcing panhandling or loitering laws, or even having them on the books. And I would like, because the speaker addressed it, staff to respond, because we don't have restrictions on panhandling and or loitering, is my understanding. And staff, either Mr. Wong or the city attorney can respond to that.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, we don't have a prohibition on panhandling. However, if it is aggressive panhandling, which is accompanied by some further action, that is prohibited, and that's consistent with many other agencies and localities in the area.
But that's different than a general panhandling or loitering, what people would consider loitering laws.
Right. Again, they'd have to do something more
Right.
than just ask someone for funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Mayor, on that topic, it would be good to have some data to maybe show, if the police department is actually giving citations for panhandling or aggressive handling, as the city manager mentioned.
That was Miss Bonaris, the city attorney.
I'm sorry. I have the city attorney.
But
Apologize.
but I don't think that we do. But let's maybe we can include. Yeah, we'll ask PD. Okay. Next.
Brittany Pollock, followed
Speaker.
by Sonia Burnt, followed by Jill Shook, followed by Allison Henry. Ms. Pollock?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello. Can y'all
Yes.
hear?
Yes, we can. Go
Welcome,
ahead.
Ms. Pollock.
Thank you. So I just want to really comment back to the housing budget and what you all have been talking about. Some of the speakers said that there's been limited resources, and there has been a limited resources for these programs because all of the money in this city goes to the police. You all have been so unbelievably unimaginative, rooting all of your solutions in policing and violence and erasure. It's remarkable, honestly, that you cannot reimagine public safety to be anything other than this. You all value police for whatever reason. We do not. The public does not. They murder our community members. Why the hell would we want them prioritized? Your budget is allocating $97.9 million to the police. It's laughable. It's also incredibly dangerous because it's getting people killed. The housing budget is a third of that. 39 million for housing? What the hell are y'all thinking? We have this whole presentation about how it's so important to create solutions for houselessness. Give people houses, give people housing, cut the police budget. Oh my God. Give that money to the housing department. That's the solution. Get people health care, give people money, universal basic income. These are things that are research-based to actually help people thrive and get out of crisis situations. It's really that simple. It's, again, so unbelievable how unimaginative you all are. You just lean on violence. You lean on the status quo. This budget is embarrassing, embarrassing. Budgets are moral documents that reflect the values of a city. You all value awful things. This is so telling.
Ms. Pollock, your time has expired.
Down $8.5 million. You decreased it by 8.
Sonia Burnt, followed by Jill Shook, followed by Allison Henry.
Welcome, Ms. Burnt.
Good evening. On the issue of interim housing, a very respected outreach worker in this city who works closely with our unsheltered residents recently told me, quote, "This whole process to even get people into interim housing is so hard," unquote. Rabbi Joshua Grader, the respected executive director of Friends Indeed, Tony Z, the head of course, and Human Services Commission are all in favor of a tiny shelter community in our city. A coalition of community members recently met with Tyler Cash, Supervisor Barger's point person on homelessness, to see if the county could provide assistance for tiny homes in our city. Mr. Cash said he would be willing to be present for an official city meeting to discuss the subject. Hope of the Valley Rescue Mission, which operates numerous tiny homes communities, advised me that they can have someone participate in such a meeting. Last December, community members were promised that the subject would be agendized. There is a rumor that it will finally be agendized in June, but we don't know when. PPD's own statistics for fiscal year 2021 show that PPD responded to over 5,700 calls for service related to unhoused people. What if we put these people in interim housing? I once heard former Chief of Police John Perez talk about calls for service involving our unsheltered folks. I asked him, "How many calls for service do you get over at Centennial Place?" He responded, "Almost none." Instead of wasting police officer time and our taxpayer money on calls for service that do not involve crimes, instead of putting our unsheltered persons through the criminal justice system for sleeping in abandoned property and incurring all of that waste of money, why not save time and money, and more importantly, alleviate suffering by providing real interim housing and efficient, effective case management services for these residents. And I would just like to say that I have a dear friend who was unhoused when I met him. He had 2 citations for sleeping in abandoned property and a citation for theft from a public utility simply for getting a drink of water out of a water main.
Ms.
Thank
Burnt,
you very much.
Ms.
Thank
Burnt,
you.
Ms. Burnt, Ms. Burnt, are you there?
she is.
Oh, Mayor, if I could ask the speaker one question.
Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
Can you please share, Ms. Burnt, any of the tiny home locations that you have personally visited that you would recommend a council member or the council to visit, just to be better educated?
Chandler Boulevard over, I think it's, I'm not sure, I think it's North Hollywood. That was one of the very first tiny home shelters. Ken Kraft and his wife Lori are extremely knowledgeable. They run about a dozen tiny home communities. They know all about costs. They know program results. They know services offered. Also, Baldwin Park, Esperanza Villa. I haven't been there, but I know Brielle Acevedo is more than happy to talk to anybody about their costs and their services offered. So, you know, there's a lot of people in this city want this, and we can't seem to get it agendized. I've been told that it's supposed to be in June. There are 2 meetings in June for the Ed Tech Committee,
Ms. Burnt,
and I haven't been told which one, and,
Ms.
and
Burnt,
nobody's even responding to my
it's
email.
June,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Burnt, it's June 1st. It's scheduled for, the subject is scheduled on June 1st for EdTech, for the EdTech
Thank
Committee of the City
Phil,
Council.
Phil, I would ask that you help my staff and I make a field trip. I haven't had a nice field trip in a long time, and I'd like to see firsthand. Maybe you could join us on the field trip. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, council member, I recently visited the Eagle Rock tiny home village that Union Station is operating. And so we can make a visit there. That's probably the closest one and the most recent one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone interested in this subject, again, can join the June 1st discussion that will be had at the Economic Development Technology Committee.
Jill Shook, followed by Allison Henry, followed by Camille Lewis.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for these great comments. Thank you, Sonia and Kennedy. I want to also thank Jennifer for her excellent work. I really can't imagine what it'd be like not to have a place to sleep and call home. The shame and the fear and the hopelessness that accompanies homelessness in reality is so sad when it's really not due to individual decisions. It's due to institutional decisions. And so it's really the high cost of housing, the low vacancy rates, the income inequality that's driving high rates of homelessness. So in addition, institutional racism that creates a significant racial disparity among people that are experiencing homelessness, as was shared. So the primary challenge is for homeless service sector is the need for housing, housing that's affordable, that continues to exceed the resources available. And so we just need to do everything we can in order to affect the increase and lasting change that we want to continue to see in the homeless count. With serious efforts need to be made to confront and mitigate systemic underlying root causes of homelessness. And so thank you for this great report. And in order to really address the need, I really urge you to do everything you can to make sure that those that want to provide housing have the opportunity to do so. Congregations want to participate. Do everything you can to make a strong policy where they can do that. Look seriously at other institutional land. Look at school district land. Make sure that it's working for them and the part you can play in that. We just don't have enough permanent supportive housing. And so please provide the funding, to everything. Thank you
Ms.
for what you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shook.
Thank you, Ms. Shook.
Allison Henry, followed by Camille Lewis.
Ms. Henry? Welcome.
Good evening, council and residents of Pasadena. Thank you, staff, for the report and all the work that you do on housing in our city. I was a volunteer, like many people in our city, for the homeless count this year. I would just say first, I was a little disappointed that no message went out to the volunteers that this was going to be on tonight's agenda, just because if people volunteered, they should come and share. We're not to share experiences of people we met, but there are definitely some concerns about how this count is conducted. As I've mentioned in previous years, I think this count starts too early in the evening and too late in the morning. We're actually not capturing data that we could be. The group I was with this year, I happen to know them, but we drove around. And just to note, the maps we were given were actually missing 2 alleyways. Thankfully, a volunteer in the team is a longtime resident and identified that. But we drove around in a car, so that really does limit your ability to connect or literally see people. And I would just, finally say that for all the counting that we do and all this, I'm worried that the report gives the feeling that this is leveling off, which actually does say in the report. And I would just say there are some legitimate issues with the count. And finally, we do need to do more for prevention. Once people are priced out of their apartment, it's very difficult to get back into one. So they may not necessarily go into the CES system. They will couch surf, they will sleep in their cars. But like I said, once you are priced out of your apartment, it's really tough to get back in, whether it's income or credit score. So there are many policies that we could be utilizing to really make our count better. And when we say we're reducing homelessness, really mean it, because I'm a little concerned that I guess I'm saying I don't trust the data, having participated in the count. Those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Henry.
Thank you. The last speaker on this item is Camille Lewis.
Ms. Lewis, welcome.
Hello, this is Camille Lewis. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
You can hear me? Oh my God, you are wasting over $90 million on the police budget. Put that money into housing. $39 million compared to 97.9. What is wrong with your city? And yes, you cannot panhandle in the city of Pasadena. That woman is wrong. It is not aggressive panhandling. They don't allow it. I cannot believe your city council would allow a police budget of $97.9 million and a housing budget of $39 million. What is wrong with you? You are pieces of shit. Pull it together. This is your job. I would yield my time, but I really just want to tell you, fuck off. I hate you. You are the worst city council ever. Do your job. I yield my time, fuckheads.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Does that complete public comment?
It does. Thank you.
And proof positive, we do believe in the First Amendment, by the way. Jenny, or Mr. Wong, the number of 39 million, does that include outside investment or resources?
The vast majority of that is outside money coming from feds or state.
Okay.
And then, of course, particularly when you talk about affordable housing development, that leverages a lot of other additional dollars as well, tax credits, bond financing, et cetera.
Yeah. And certainly, where are we with the effort to create our own housing trust and draw more resources together with our surrounding cities?
Yeah, that bill, I believe, passed out of the Senate last week and is going over to the Assembly. So hopefully, before the end of June, it will be approved.
Great. And is there still an effort to seed the housing trust with upwards of $40 million?
Yes, Senator Portantino's budget request is $40 million.
Great, thank you. Next, questions, comments? I think that was it. Oh, Mr. Hampton, you had some questions or comments.
Yeah, you know what? Most of my questions were answered throughout the presentation, and then also from the follow-ups from my colleagues. I just want to commend the housing department for the work that they're doing. I do have one question that wasn't fully answered, but you kind of alluded to it, Mayor, and it was in relates to do we know what the percentage of unhoused people are on substance abuse or mental illness? Is there a percentage like, or do you check a box to say, you know, maybe there's something there, and then have a caseworker follow up on it?
So this is self-reported data. And for substance use, it was 24%, and mental health was 35%.
And some of them, I would imagine, present dual diagnosis and
Yeah, absolutely. There's overlap.
yeah. And one of the issues, Mr. Hampton, is in discussions with Dr. Sharon and with Dr. Morgan at the hospital, um, the CEO of Huntington Hospital. You know, it's sometimes it's difficult to determine because people who are smoking certain substances or particularly if they are, well, if some of the stronger drugs also cause them to present as though they have a mental health issue, but it's really the impacts of the drugs, the cumulative impacts. So it's a sad situation, and I think we have to continue to find ways to address these issues, particularly the combination of mental health, substance abuse, disabilities, in helping people receive not just help with housing, but help with all of the various issues that may come along, and maybe even resulted in them being homeless. Very complicated issue,
Right.
and we will continue our efforts. Mr. Hampton?
No, definitely a very complicated issue, and you know, it's not an issue that we only take up once a year, but in this, and as far as this count goes, we only hear about it once a year. I've asked this question before, and maybe it's just, you know, a matter of funding, but why don't we do this count twice a year?
That's a good question. Um, part of partly just for it's a capacity issue that we spend 9 to 10 months actually per year working on the homeless count. We've already started working on next year's homeless count, believe it or not. We took about a week off and then started the next one. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the homeless count data is useful in certain ways, but also has a lot of limitations. Um, and so we do other analyses throughout the year to look at things like our annualized total, the number of people who are touching our service system. There are a number of metrics that we track throughout the year, such as length of time homeless, recidivism into homelessness, housing retention rates. So this is really just one slice of the data that we look to inform our strategic planning and our funding allocations. Um, and so I think it's just the most visible slice, I would say.
Is it always the same time of year around um,
It is, yeah. So
spring, winter, end of winter, spring?
yes. So HUD requires that the count take place in the last 10 days in January. This year, we did get a waiver from HUD to postpone it, to allow us to postpone it, and that was due to the Omicron outbreak. And almost every continuum of care did the same thing. So we did postpone it by 1 month. And the count takes place at that time because it's a cold time of year, and people are likely to be in shelters, particularly winter shelters, when it is cold, and it's easier to collect data from folks while they're in shelter. So that's why it takes place in the winter at the same time every year.
Right, and I appreciate that feedback, and this is the reason why this will be the second time I've asked for, why don't we do it twice? Because in the winter, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like there's more opportunities for people to get off the street. In the summer months, I think it's more visible, and I think, the weather is better. And maybe there's not as many shelters, but of course, COVID has changed some of that shelter capability. But why not look at the numbers during the summer months as well, or get an idea of how many people you see on the streets during the summer months or during the spring when there are more people and the weather is better. It's California, so our weather is pretty decent year round, but it is colder in the winter, and it does seem like there's a lot of opportunities during the winter for people to find shelter, and there's funding around that time versus the summer. Or at least maybe it's me visually, I see more of it during the summer, right? I see more people in the parks. I see more people in the streets during the summer months than I do during the winter months.
And keep in mind that those who are in shelters, they're also included in the homeless count.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying that if they're in shelters and they are typically in Pasadena, but they decided to go to LA because there wasn't any shelter in Pasadena, and then they came back to Pasadena, then our numbers aren't really. I mean, people are transient, right? So they move from place to place, or wherever there is ability, wherever there's space, and so I don't know if our numbers are fully reflected.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm just trying to figure if we're looking at if our numbers are fully reflected to what we think our number is on a day-to-day basis, living on the street in Pasadena.
Again, the best way to utilize the homeless count results are to look at demographic trends. The snapshot point in time number is useful, um, but it really doesn't tell us. It doesn't tell us how many people are homeless tonight, or it doesn't include the folks who are going to get housed next week or who are going to fall into homelessness next week. It's just that one night, and because of that limitation, really the best way to use the data is to look at is to use it for demographic information. Much like the census. I mean, the homeless count was developed to supplement the US Census. But again, we do look to other data sources throughout the year to gain additional information about our homeless population, about how we're serving them, about gaps in our system.
Thank you. In your percentage, do you, and maybe I'm not seeing it here, I'm looking through it right now. Is there a service resistant percentage? Like people that just say, I'm not talking to anybody, I don't want any help, I don't want shelter.
So I don't have a figure for that, but I would just counter that's what we used to think of as service resistance. Now we really think of as
terminology.
that's okay. We've learned that we've had to modify the way that we offer services so that more folks will be agreeable to accepting them, and that it takes a long time for certain individuals to engage with our services. It's an average of 17 encounters actually with a street outreach team before someone's willing to engage. And so our street outreach teams, and we have a really vast network of street outreach teams in Pasadena, are persistent and are out there building trust with individuals. And it's actually very few individuals who aren't engaged in some level with our service network.
Yeah, I have oh my gosh, I have them in my notes, but I can't remember her name. I think her name might have been Nikki, and she lived at the bus stop on Los Robles and Woodbury. And I had a brief conversation with her, and I think our port team had reached out to her. There had been multiple contacts. I think she's moved a little higher up into Altadena as of late. And one of the takeaways I received from her, and not just her, but other people that I have spoke to that are, you know, living on the street or choose, I'm not choosing, it's not a choice, you know, but living on the street is that some of the requirements of finding housing, as you mentioned, you know, dropping some of those requirements have been helpful. They feel very controlling. I talked to someone who was previously in prison, incarcerated, who was living on the streets, and he had mentioned to me that he likes his freedom, and you know, having to check in at a certain time and then be back at a certain time to him felt like incarceration in a way. And so when we're looking at the time frames when people have to be in and what they have to do and those requirements, I think that, you know, and I'm sure that you have caseworkers that are asking people these questions all the time anyhow. As you mentioned, you know, lowering the barriers to getting people housing is actually beneficial to getting more people off of the streets when we have housing or a location for them. So continue to look at that and continue to do what you and all the service providers can do to, you know, make it easier, make it just, you know, make it as easy as, you know, anyone just living a day to day. You know, I could walk out of my house at 3 a.m. if I want to. You know, that's not the case for some of the people that are, you know, living on the street, and that's, you know, maybe the reason why they pick or choose that route versus the options that may be presented because there's less control. So just continue to do that and continue to keep up the good efforts. The housing department, you guys have done a fantastic job, and I just want to applaud your efforts, just like my colleagues have.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. Yeah, I think we have to keep in mind that this is a snapshot in time, and you know, continue our efforts and increase our efforts to address these issues. I'm you know, the service resistant population, I think we've learned is maybe that's not the correct term. We need to think of it differently, and some of, you know, some individuals don't know that they need services or need assistance, and looking at how we better address the issue of substance and mental health and disability and all of the things that come along with it is absolutely the correct approach. So I'm stunned, maybe not stunned, but you know, it's 17 contacts before an average of 17 contacts before some people accept help is very indicative of the help that people need and how we need to change the frame and recognize that that some people are struggling not just with the homelessness but all of the issues that come along with it. And we're doing that countywide. The Housing First effort is one such effort. Maybe you want to touch on that, Mr. Wong.
Sure. The Housing First Pasadena was an early adopter of the Housing First program, and for permanent supportive housing, just as Councilmember Hampton had mentioned, when there are too many barriers to enter into the services or enter into the housing, then people don't take advantage of it, particularly the ones who need it the most. So permanent supportive housing, Housing First, says let's get you into the housing, even straight off the street to the housing without requirements to be sober for a certain period of time or et cetera. And then once you're housed, what was discovered was that there's a high rate of success in dealing then with the substance use disorder, but housing first, hence the name Housing First. So once you stabilize the housing, get them into housing, then you can address those root causes for why they ended up homeless to begin with.
So your points all very well taken, Mr. Hampton, and we should all look for ways to continue to address these issues, particularly as we learn from our past experiences and undertake programs and efforts like the Housing First model, and continue to do that. Okay, I think that completes our discussion. on this issue. I'm looking around. And it also completes our agenda. Thank you for your continued good work, Mr. Wong and Jennifer.
Mayor, we have 9 cards submitted for public comment on matters not on the agenda.
Okay. Mr. Kennedy, did you oh, actually, before we get to that, Ms. Williams, you had a report out for the, sure. I think this is the time.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So I attended the SCAG General Assembly meeting a week and a half ago now in Desert Hills. And so for those of you who are less familiar with it, the Southern California Association of Governments is the regional metropolitan planning organization for Southern California. So it's a 5 county region that goes from Ventura down to Orange County, and it's the largest one in the state. There are 18 MPOs in the state. So they essentially they originated as doing most of the transportation funding from the federal government and have expanded into roles with sustainability, planning, and the regional housing needs assessment. That's probably how most people remember SCAG, but they actually started out as a transportation funding organization. So a lot of the funding for housing and for transportation goes through them. We are a member of SCAG, and so all of the cities in SCAG convened Thursday and Friday to go through an agenda to elect new officers and to talk about some of the issues that are going on in the region and trying to implement sort of a more efficient transportation system that is connected to housing in order to reduce greenhouse gases. So I did get some data from them that I'll share with probably with our planning department, but they have a lot of really good data sets and sort of GIS systems and a lot of good things that I think are very helpful for the cities like us in trying to do our planning. But we did vote for new officers and did learn a lot about how we're sort of implementing the regional transportation plan is what it's called, and the sustainable communities assessment. So.
Thank you. And thank you for representing the city at that meeting. Important meeting. Mr. Kennedy, your hand is up before we turn to public comment for matters not on the agenda. Did you have a comment?
I don't know, Mayor, if now is the appropriate time, but I'll go ahead and be recognized and appreciated. Hearts are heavy all across the United States for what happened in Buffalo. A lone gunman, for whatever reason, a white supremacist, went to a Black community and decided that he would eliminate as many lives as he could. He had planned to eliminate more lives than he did. 10 lives that we know of thus far have been snuffed out by evil. And then shortly thereafter, or within a time period not too far after, here in California, another shooting of our Taiwanese American brothers and sisters by another Asian. The point for me is beyond simply colorization, ethnicity. It's about humanity, whether you are African American, Latino, white, Asian, indigenous, or one of the ethnic groups that make up the melting pot of America. You have to, at some point, be honest with yourself and say, we must demonstrate our humanity by ensuring that weapons that need to be on the battlefield, if at all, cannot be so readily available domestically to perpetrate and carry out such heinous acts. And so any words that I have, any comments that I have about the shootings that have taken place around the country ring hollow in some respects, because unless there is a collective will to do something, I fear that one person experiencing the pain who was not there but feels the pain is sorely insufficient for any action to take place. But at the very least, I felt it was incumbent upon me to mention the awful shootings that had taken place all too often. Some racist or white supremacists doing evil. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I'm going to take your comments as a motion that we adjourn in memory of the victims of the Buffalo shooting, as well as other victims of crime.
I will second that motion. And I was going to mention the same thing at the end of the meeting, and so I'm glad that Councilmember Kennedy did. And I also want to add in the name of Eric Thomas, young man who was killed in Pasadena to gun violence on Fair Oaks in our own community. So, Mayor, if we could add the name of Eric Thomas to that.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. We will do that, and again include all victims of crime. Now we turn to public comment for matters not on the agenda.
We have 9 speaker cards submitted. Alan Shea, who has not checked into the meeting, so it'll be Michael Williams, followed by Karina Kay, followed by Brittany Pollock, followed by Olden Denham, then Janae Lennox, Andres Martinez, Heavenly Hughes, who's not checked in, and then Camille Lewis. Mr. Williams, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
So of course, as always, I'm calling in to ask that the council put pressure on the city manager to fire the officers that killed Anthony McClain. It is unreasonable that this hasn't happened yet. We always, every time one of these tragedies happen, which is always sad, but it always rings hollow every time your words come out of your mouth, because something that you have control over, an issue that you have control over, a tragedy that you have control over, you have been inactive on. How can you look at anyone else and what they do with the tragedies that happen in their communities when you have something? You've had multiple. Anthony McClain was not the first. You did nothing about Kendrick McDade. You did nothing about J.R. Thomas. You did nothing about Chris Ballou. And now you're doing nothing about Anthony McClain. I mean, I don't want to say that you're insincere about your words, but I'm just saying it on my ears, it rings hollow. Because you have the ability to do something about this tragedy, and you refuse to do it. You have the capability. This is something that needs to be addressed, else it's going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening. Just like the inaction of our federal government on gun control or on mental health resources, this is what your inaction is doing. Continually causing harm to Black communities by not putting accountability on the police department. You can't look at other people and shake your head when you are doing the exact same thing.
Mr. Williams, your time has expired.
Fire the officers that killed Anthony McClain.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Next speaker.
Mr. Williams. Alan Shea is still not in the meeting, so we'll move on to Karina Kay, followed by Brittany Pollock, followed by Olden Denham. Karina,
Hi, can you hear me?
we can. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. My name is Karina. I'm a Pasadena resident and member of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. Yeah, the hypocrisy of that last statement, Councilmember Kennedy. You said some racist white supremacists doing evil. What do you think of Edwin Dumagwindon? Some racist white supremacists doing evil. What do you think of Edwin Dumagwindon? Officer Edwin Dumagwindon of the Pasadena Police Department needs to be fired. I do agree with there being a lack of political will to do anything when murder, black death, police violence against black bodies happens. So the question is to this council, what would you do? If you were active, you're not currently when it comes to race issues and racial injustice, but if you were active, what would you do? The answer is to hold the police department accountable. The answer is to see killer cops for what and who they are. The answer is to understand racial biases run rampant in your department. Cynthia Kurtz, I want to get to you next. I'm confused as to why you have such a role to play in the personnel of your department. Only when it comes to
Ms. Kay, please direct your comments to the council.
Leave it to the council.
Direct your comments to the
Okay,
city
so
council.
you all have a role. You all have a
Thank
role
you.
in demanding that this police department be held accountable, which is under the city manager, and her name right now is Cynthia Kurtz. So you have such a role in the hiring. You have another role in the firing as well. So interim or not, you need to do something about your personnel in your department right now. You need to fire the officers who murdered Anthony McLean, and that's directed to all of you. You all have names, and I'll use them whenever the fuck I want to. Don't ever interrupt me again, because I have no respect for you, Gordo. None. Or any of you, so long as you make Black lives not matter in the city of Pasadena. Black lives do matter. They will matter. Fire those officers.
Miss Karina, your time has expired. Thank you.
Ms. Kay. Next speaker.
Can y'all hear me?
Brittany Pollock, go ahead.
I'm truly embarrassed for y'all. This entire meeting has been such an embarrassment. In your speech about the victims in Buffalo, you said you wanted to support all members who have been victims of crime. Do you not think Black people who have been murdered by police are in that list? It's unbelievable that you will not fire the officers. This has been going on for years. The police department is corrupt. Reimagine public safety and defund the fucking police. $97.9 million y'all are trying to give them this year? Is that a joke? Police do nothing to protect public safety, and let Buffalo be an example of that. Police didn't stop that from happening. Police don't stop white supremacy. Police are white supremacy. Also, I just have to say, the entire houseless presentation you gave, you had a worker come on to your comment and say that your count was flawed. You didn't even invite the workers into the conversation. What the hell did we just listen to? That whole presentation was a joke. You all are such an embarrassment. It's real. It's like unbelievable what we listen to in these council meetings. And you all are in charge? You all should be fired. You are misappropriating millions of dollars to go to violent murderers and white supremacists. The system of police is rooted in slave catching. That's literally what police were invented to do, is to find, escape, enslaved people and return them back to plantations. That is the core job of police. And that continues today. That's why we continue to see Black people all over the country, including Pasadena.
Ms.
murdered.
Pollock, your time has
And y'all
expired.
don't give a shit. Y'all don't give
Thank you,
a
Ms.
shit.
Pollock.
Do something.
We'll move
Next
on to
speaker.
Olden Denham, followed by Janae Lennox, followed by Andres Martinez.
Mr. Denham.
*6 to unmute, Mr. Denham. There you go. 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello and good afternoon, City Councilman, and all due respect. I see you guys are still not going to take any action on the Anthony McLean thing. I hear people saying you have the power to do so. I don't believe you do. I believe the police unions are so strong that you can't do anything about it, and you don't want to admit that you don't have that power. But at any rate, I've looked at the report that came out that I guess the district attorney sanctioned or okayed the killing of Anthony McLean. It's bad enough that they shot a young man in the back because he was running away, trying to get away, which isn't a crime. It's bad enough that that happened. That then, on top of that, the police corruption, planting a gun on the scene, and they did a real shitty job of it. Excuse me for saying so. I have looked at every bit of the footage from the police website, and also here's one that I want to note that no one's want to mention: the fact that Anthony McLean had his cell phone in his left hand the whole time. When you look at the first shots of the first officer's chest cam, you see Anthony McLean has his cell phone in his hand. The officer was not even alarmed at all. He opened the door for Anthony McLean. The young man ran, wanted to get away. And that's when the officer pulled his gun. There was no threat. Is there ever a threat anywhere in there? And on top of that, there's never a mention about the cell phone until it came up to you. Now, the cell phone that Anthony McLean, you can take a look at the footage off of the team center that's right next to our QB line. If you look at the footage over there, you can see Anthony McLean drop his cell phone 1 second after he was shot in the back on the east side of the street. No one's mentioned that. No one wanted to mention the cell phone. They're trying to say they found a cell phone in the car. If you look at the footage from the team center, you will see him drop the gun. Drop his cell phone, right after he had been shot in the back. This young man was only.
Mr. Denham, your time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Dunham. Next speaker.
Thank you. Alan Chase still not in the meeting. Janae Lennox, followed by Andres Martinez, followed by Heavenly Hughes, followed by Camille Lewis, who appears to have left the meeting. Miss Lennox, go ahead. 2 minutes.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
So I want to make this very clear. We in the Black community are mourning after the events that happened in Buffalo. And I wonder if you guys can understand for a second how a white supremacist can go into a Black community and murder endlessly and nothing happens. Why would he think that's okay? Well, when communities like yourself allow officers to murder innocent Black folks, it incites that you in the community do not believe that Black lives matter, that it's okay to kill us, because at the end of the day, if law enforcement who are supposed to protect can kill with impunity Black folks and get nothing happen to them, they can actually keep their jobs because the community, which would be you, says it's okay, then it incites others to think that it's absolutely okay to murder us. I want you to also know it is absolutely crazy how a murderer who slaughtered 13 people got more humanity and care than Anthony McLean did. I want to make that very clear, that a murderer slaughtered Black folks, got more care than Anthony McLean did, who did nothing. He didn't hurt a person. He didn't have history of hurting people. He cared. He wanted to go home to his family. He ran out of fear of his life, which is clearly a just thing that he did. And a murderer who could slaughter gets more care than Anthony McLean. Even after his murder, you guys make it very clear.
Miss
Make
Lennox.
it very clear to Black folks.
Miss Lennox, your time has expired.
Fire the officer.
Thank you. Andres Martinez, it appears Alan Shea, Heavenly Hughes, and Camille Lewis are not in the meeting. So Andres, there you go.
Okay, hi City Council.
2 minutes, go
I'm
ahead.
here on behalf of the, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I'm here on behalf of the California Mortgage Relief Program, which is managed by the California Homeowner Relief Corporation and part of the California Housing Finance Authority. And we wanted to urge all residents that there's a mortgage relief program providing up to $80,000 to eligible homeowners to pay past due mortgage relief from 2021. You must be single-family home and have a household income below 100% of the county's median income. Additional eligibility requirements are available at the website, californiamortgagerelief.org. And I will share more details with the council members and follow up for support in getting the word out. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no more public comment, individuals who have requested to speak in the meeting, the public comment on matters not on the agenda is concluded.
Thank you. And as consistent, before we adjourn or recess to closed session, on the motion of Mr. Kennedy, we will adjourn in memory of the victims in Buffalo as well as victims in Lakewood over the weekend, as well as victims of all crime. Please stand. Oh, I'm sorry, it was not Lakewood, it was Laguna Woods. We will recess to closed session. If everyone will just take 5 minutes and.
I have a quick announcement. The City Council will convene in the virtual meeting room to discuss closed session item A on today's agenda. An opportunity is provided at this time for public comment on the closed session items. There being no public comment requests submitted, the City Council will now recess into closed session to discuss item A. We will take a 5-minute break and then head over to the closed session.
Okay, if everyone will log on in 5 minutes, if not before, thank you.